Here, eat." My daughter-in-law's voice pierced the damp afternoon air like an icy blade. The stench of days of decay rose from the overturned trash can, a sickeningly sour cloud of decomposition. I knew that smell would haunt me, a smell forever linked to the deepest, most heartbreaking humiliation of my 64 years. There, among the damp coffee grounds, discarded vegetable peelings, and shiny eggshells, lay the half-eaten hamburger I'd thrown out only an hour earlier. The bun was soaked with an incomprehensible moisture, the patty a tragic shade of gray, a monument to my failed attempt to protect my grandchildren. "Until you eat this," Amelia repeated, "you'll never see them again. Do you understand?" I understood all too well. I looked up from the trash at my feet to look at Amelia, really look at her. I saw her lower lip quiver, the wild, desperate fury that burned in her eyes, and beneath it all, a deep, unsettling satisfaction. Without a word, I turned my back on her, on the fetid offering in the grass, on the life I knew. The slam of the back door echoed behind me, like a punctuation mark at the end of our family. But I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was not the end. This was the beginning. The beginning of a lesson she would never, ever forget. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I drove, the manicured lawns and cheerful mailboxes of the suburban landscape blurring into a watercolor of mockery. How had we arrived at this grotesque destination? This slow, insidious unraveling of a relationship that had once held such radiant promise. My mind spun back to the day Daniel, my only son, my entire world, had brought Amelia home. She was a firecracker, vibrant and full of laughter, with an ambition in her eyes that I, a woman who had clawed her way up from nothing to build a successful catering business, could recognize and respect. Their wedding was a sun-drenched affair, a storybook beginning I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times. And for a while, the story continued as written. Then came Chloe, and 2 years later, Liam. My grandchildren. They were not just lights in my world, they were the twin suns around which my universe now revolved. From the moment I first held Chloe, so fragile and perfect in my arms, I was seized by a love so fierce and protective it felt primal. It was a love that settled into my very marrow, a love that would, ultimately, set me on a collision course with their mother. The discord began as a series of minor tremors before it escalated into a full-blown earthquake. Amelia's parenting philosophy was a universe away from my own. She championed the mantra of letting kids be kids, a phrase that, to my ears, sounded like a convenient excuse for nutritional apathy. Her pantry was a testament to modern convenience, a brightly colored graveyard of sugary cereals, processed snacks, and frozen meals promising dinner in 15 minutes. Fresh vegetables were rare visitors at their dinner table, and when they did appear, they were often met with suspicion and refusal, a battle Amelia seemed unwilling to fight. My gentle suggestions for healthier alternatives were met with polite, unyielding smiles. "It's just easier this way, Elena," she would say, her tone light, belying the steel in her eyes. "They're happy and healthy, that's what matters." But were they? Chloe, at only 6, was already noticeably overweight, her movements lacking the easy grace of other children her age. Liam, a whirlwind of 4-year-old energy, would often crash into inexplicable bouts of lethargy, his tantrums epic and bewildering. I saw the connection, as clear as the blue sky, between the chemical-laden junk they consumed and their fluctuating well-being. I tried to reason with Daniel, but he was trapped, a reluctant and weary referee in a game where both sides claimed to be fighting for the children's best interests. "Mom, please," he would plead, his face etched with the strain of his divided loyalties. "Just try to get along with her. Don't make me choose. For the kid's sake." And I did try. For Chloe and Liam, I swallowed my concerns until they became a bitter taste in my mouth. I watched as my precious grandchildren were nourished on a diet I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. My peace offerings of fresh fruit and vegetables would pointedly wither in her refrigerator's crisper drawer. My offers to cook were dismissed as interference, as implicit criticisms of her own maternal competence. The tension in their home became a palpable entity, a silent, uninvited guest that soured every family gathering. My late husband, Richard, had died of a massive coronary at 52. The doctors had been clear. Years of poor diet and a high-stress lifestyle had been a death sentence. After he was gone, I had thrown myself into learning everything I could about nutrition, transforming my body and, eventually, my passion into a business that celebrated wholesome, life-giving food. This wasn't just a preference for me, it was a matter of life and death, a lesson learned through the most painful loss imaginable. How could Amelia not see she was laying the same deadly groundwork for my grandchildren? The incident with the hamburger was the inevitable, explosive culmination of this long war. That afternoon, I had arrived, by prior arrangement, with a vegetable lasagna I'd lovingly prepared, packed with nutrients and flavor. I found Chloe and Liam zoning out in front of the television's flickering glare, two large, greasy fast food bags slumping on the coffee table beside them. The cloying smell of fried food hung in the air, a scent I associated with clogged arteries and a slow, inexorable decline. "Amelia," I had said, my voice trembling with a barely suppressed tremor of despair. "This is poison for them. You know it is." She had turned from the sink, her expression a mask of weary defiance. "They were hungry, Elena. And I was tired. It's just one meal." But it wasn't just one meal. It was every meal. It was the symbol of her casual disregard for their future. And in that moment, the carefully constructed dam of my self-control shattered. I seized the greasy bags and, in a fog of righteous fury, marched out the back door and shoved them deep into the trash can. The ensuing confrontation was a vortex of recrimination and rage, culminating in Amelia's monstrous, degrading ultimatum. Now, driving aimlessly, the scene replayed in my mind on a grotesque, unending loop. She had meant to break me, to grind my spirit into the dirt and force my submission. But she had made a critical miscalculation. She had underestimated the strength of a grandmother's love and the terrifying lengths to which I would go to protect what was mine. When I returned to the sterile quiet of my empty house, I sat for a long time, the telephone receiver a cold, heavy weight in my hand. I knew what I had to do. It was a nuclear option, a move that would irradiate the landscape of our family for years to come. But reason had failed. Patience had been exhausted. For my every effort, I had been offered garbage to eat. My duty was clear. With a deep breath that did little to calm the frantic, panicked drumming of my heart, I dialed the number for Child Protective Services. The voice of the intake officer was a placid stream in the raging river of my emotions. As I recounted the situation, I was careful, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. I painted a picture of chronic and persistent nutritional neglect. I spoke of my specific, documented concerns, Chloe's struggles with weight and Liam's erratic energy levels and behavior. I framed it not as a personal vendetta, but as a heartbreaking and desperate plea for intervention from a grandmother who had exhausted all other avenues. I meticulously detailed the children's diet, a litany of processed sugars, saturated fats, and empty calories. I did not, however, mention the hamburger. That singular degradation was my secret, a private well of shame and fuel. To the woman on the other end of the line, I was simply a loving, concerned grandmother, pushed to the brink of desperation. I was reasonable, articulate, and utterly convincing. In the week that followed, an anxious, leaden silence descended. My texts to Daniel were met with an unnerving void, my calls sent directly to voicemail. The silence was an accusation in itself, a testament to the seismic rift I had opened. I could vividly imagine the narrative Amelia was weaving, casting herself as the persecuted victim of a monstrous, meddling mother-in-law. The truth, as it often is, was far more complex, but I knew that in the court of my son's heart, I had likely already been judged and found guilty. I confided in my friend, Carol, over coffee a few days later. Her sharp eyes scanned my face as I recounted a sanitized version of the story. "Elena, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "CPS, that's a bell you can't unring. This could tear your family apart for good." "What choice did I have, Carol?" I countered, my voice raw. "Watch them slowly poison my grandchildren? Be denied access to them anyway?" She pushed me to this. Carol stirred her latte, her silence a form of gentle judgment. "There are always choices," she murmured, but didn't press the issue. Finally, a social worker named Mrs. Davis contacted me. She was polite but brisk, her questions gentle but acutely probing. I calmly reiterated my concerns, sticking to the facts and avoiding hyperbole. I spoke of Richard, of my deeply personal understanding of how a poor diet could devastate a family. It was a calculated move, designed to lend weight and gravitas to my claims. Mrs. Davis listened patiently, her expression unreadable. She informed me she would be conducting a home visit, speaking with Daniel and Amelia, and observing the children. She would, she added, let them know the complaint had come from a concerned family member. The anonymity was a thin veil, and we both knew it. The day of Mrs. Davis's visit was one of the longest of my life. I paced my kitchen, my mind a torture chamber of worst-case scenarios. Had I unleashed a bureaucratic monster that would traumatize my grandchildren? Would they be taken away? Had my righteous act of protection been, in fact, an act of supreme selfishness? 2 agonizing days later, Mrs. Davis called. Her tone was, as always, professionally neutral. She informed me that she had conducted a thorough visit and had a long and productive conversation with my son and daughter-in-law. They had discussed, in detail, the children's diet. Amelia, she said, had been receptive to feedback and had agreed to attend a series of nutritional workshops for parents. There would be follow-up visits, Mrs. Davis assured me, to monitor their progress and ensure compliance. It was a bloodless, bureaucratic victory. No dramatic vindication, no tearful confession. But it was a start. A crack in Amelia's fortress of defiance. The call from Daniel came that evening. His voice was a shard of glass against my ear. "How could you, Mom?" The words were heavy with a pain and betrayal that wounded me more than any shouting could. To go behind our backs? To bring strangers into our home to judge us? To judge Amelia? I tried to explain, my words stumbling over each other in my desperate need to make him understand. But he was unreachable, encased in a wall of loyalty to his wife. "You've gone too far," he said, his voice thick with a disappointment that felt like a physical blow. "Amelia is humiliated. She's devastated. I don't know if we can ever come back from this. We need space, Mom. A lot of space. Don't call us. We'll call you." The line went dead, leaving me in a silence so profound it felt like the end of the world. The weeks that followed were a gray, featureless landscape of grief. The silence from Daniel's home was absolute and impenetrable. I was blocked. A ghost in the life of my own son. The absence of my grandchildren was a constant, throbbing ache in the center of my chest. I threw myself into my business, but the familiar, comforting rituals of the kitchen brought no solace. Every healthy meal I crafted was a bitter reminder of the children I could no longer nourish. Sleep was a minefield of nightmares. Chloe and Liam, their faces just out of reach, calling my name before fading into darkness. One lonely afternoon, I found myself in the park near their house, a pathetic act of self-torture. I watched as other grandmothers pushed their grandchildren on the swings, their easy laughter a symphony of everything I had lost. I saw Amelia's car drive past, Chloe's face a small, pale oval in the back window. For a heartbeat, I thought she saw me, but the car didn't slow. I was invisible. The period of exile stretched into a month, then 2. The sharp edges of my rage began to soften, eroded by the relentless tide of my sorrow. For the first time, I began to seriously question my own role in the disaster. My methods, my certitude, my refusal to compromise. I saw how my constant help could have felt like a constant judgment. I began to see Amelia not just as my adversary, but as a young, overworked mother, doing her best in a world that sells convenience as a virtue. My act of revenge had brought me no satisfaction, only this desolate, echoing emptiness. It was a quiet Tuesday in late autumn when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I nearly ignored it, but some impulse made me answer. "Hello." A moment of hesitation, and then Elena? "It's Amelia." I sank into a chair, my legs turning to water. I had prepared 1,000 speeches for this moment, 1,000 justifications and arguments. They all evaporated. "Amelia," I whispered. The workshops are over, she said, her voice small and tight. I learned a lot. I see things differently now. There was a long pause, filled with the static of everything unsaid between us. Chloe and Liam miss you terribly. They ask about you every day. She took a shaky breath. I was wrong, Elena. The way I treated you, it was monstrous. I'm so sorry. The carefully constructed walls of my anger, my resentment, my self-righteousness, didn't just crumble. They turned to dust and blew away. All that was left was the raw, aching love I felt for my family, for this complicated woman who was the gatekeeper to my heart. I'm sorry too, I said, my voice breaking on a sob I hadn't realized was building. I never should have. I should have found another way. Maybe there wasn't another way, she said softly. Maybe we both needed a shock to the system. In the weeks and months that followed, we began the slow, delicate work of rebuilding. It was like learning a new language, one of caution, respect, and hesitant forgiveness. We started with coffee in a neutral location, then a short, supervised visit with the children at the park. There were no grand pronouncements, just the quiet, incremental steps of two women trying to find their way back to a place of peace. Amelia started asking me for recipes. I taught her how to make a simple lentil soup, a chicken stock from scratch. She sent me pictures of the children eating quinoa and roasted asparagus, small white flags of surrender and a new beginning. One sun-drenched Saturday afternoon, almost a year after the incident, Daniel's car pulled into my driveway. The whole family. My heart performed a familiar, joyous acrobat's flip. Chloe and Liam erupted from the car, barreling towards me with squeals of "Grandma." I enveloped them in a hug, breathing in the scent of their hair, a scent I now knew was more precious to me than air itself. As the children ran off to demolish the sprinkler I'd set up, Amelia approached me. In her hands, she carried a casserole dish, a peace offering I recognized instantly. A vegetable lasagna, its top golden and bubbling. Our eyes met over the steaming dish, and in their depths, I saw a silent acknowledgement of the war we had survived. I used whole wheat pasta, she said, a small, proud smile playing on her lips. Later that evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the sky, I sat on my porch, a contented ache in my bones from a day of unadulterated joy. The sound of my grandchildren's laughter, a melody I had once feared I would never hear in my home again, drifted through the open door. Daniel and Amelia were in the kitchen, their quiet, harmonious conversation a soothing balm on my soul. All was well. And yet, as a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree, an icy finger traced a path down my spine. Had it all been a little too perfect? This seamless transition from bitter enemies to culinary collaborators? The memory of that day, of the stench of decay and the cold, triumphant fury in Amelia's eyes, was a stain that no amount of time could ever fully wash away. I watched her through the kitchen window as she plated the lasagna, her movements fluid and efficient. Her smile, as she handed a plate to Daniel, looked utterly genuine. But was it? As she sat down at my table, in my home, she caught my eye and her smile widened. "See, Elena," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. "You just have to be patient. Eventually, people will eat whatever you put in front of them." It was a phrase that could have been innocent, a simple joke about her picky children finally eating vegetables. But coming from her, after what she had done, it landed like a stone in my gut. My blood ran cold. Later, as I was tucking Chloe into the guest bed, she looked up at me with wide, serious eyes. "Mommy says we have to eat all our vegetables now, Grandma," she whispered. "She says it's the only way to make sure we stay healthy and stay with you." A child's simple relaying of a mother's words, but the phrasing, the implied conditionality, made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. The final, chilling detail came as I was cleaning up after they had left, basking in the afterglow of a perfect day. While rinsing Amelia's lasagna dish, I noticed it was a brand I recognized, a high-end, artisan ceramic bakeware I adored. But I owned my set in blue. Hers was green. It was from a small, boutique pottery shop in the next state, a place I had visited once, years ago. There was no conceivable way she would know about it, let alone own a piece from the same collection. Unless she had been researching me, studying my tastes, my preferences, my life, with a forensic level of detail. The idyllic scene of the afternoon shattered, replaced by a far more terrifying picture. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't a new beginning. This was an occupation. A colonization. She hadn't just gotten past what I'd done, she had studied my methods and perfected them. She had learned to use my own weapons, love, concern, and wholesome food, against me. She had fought a battle for control and lost, so she had started a new war, a silent, insidious one where she controlled every piece on the board. My revenge had been a single, desperate act. Hers, I was beginning to realize, was a masterpiece of long-term strategy. The open-ended question was no longer whether she had forgiven me. I knew now she hadn't. The real question, the one that left me standing paralyzed in the deepening gloom of my kitchen, was terrifyingly simple. What, exactly, was her endgame? The game was still being played, and I understood with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty that I was no longer a player. I was the prize.
So, another story of my grandmother has ended, and be clicking here, you will have when more such stories.